The moment they stop fearing your absence is the moment they stop earning your presence. Sit with that, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why certain people are never taken for granted and exactly how to become one of them. But I want to be honest with you before we go any further. This isn't for people looking for comfort. This isn't a video that will make you feel better and change nothing. This is for people who are done being comfortable and ready to operate differently. Most people who hear this will nod, feel something stir, and go right back to who they were yesterday. And that's fine. That's expected. Because it's exactly why this keeps working for the few who actually act on it. What you're about to hear isn't guesswork. It isn't a motivational slogan dressed up as wisdom. It traces back to Machiavelli's The Prince, and it's reinforced by decades of documented research on scarcity and human attention. This is studied behavior, not opinion. So picture this. Picture someone right now, staring at their phone, rereading the last message they sent. No reply. Refreshing it, as if the words might rearrange themselves into an answer. Aching, quietly, for a reply that isn't coming. That's the majority. Begging, waiting, hoping to be noticed by people who've stopped noticing them. Then there's the few, the ones who are never chased because they were never desperate to begin with, the ones whose absence creates a silence people can't sit in. But before you can become someone whose absence is feared, you have to understand honestly why it isn't right now. Here's the mechanism most people never see, even while it's shaping every relationship they have. People don't value what's guaranteed. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Tversky proved this decades ago. Losses hit the human mind roughly twice as hard as equivalent gains. Which means reminding someone to appreciate you does almost nothing. But the possibility of losing you? That reaches somewhere deeper. Picture two co-workers. One answers every message within seconds, cancels their own plans to help, is always available. They're liked. They're also ignored, overworked, and quietly resented for how easy they are to lean on. The other is warm, but selective. Present, but not guaranteed. People notice when she's in the room because they've felt what it's like when she isn't. That's the divide. The asleep majority confuse constant availability with love. The awake few understand that attention is currency, and currency loses value the moment it's unlimited. Here are the 5 things that separate the two, starting with the one almost everyone gets backwards. Almost everyone gets this first one backwards. They think explaining themselves builds trust. It doesn't. It builds access and gives it away for free. Picture this. You didn't reply for a few hours. Maybe you were busy, maybe you just needed the silence. And now you're sitting there, typing out a paragraph explaining exactly why, deleting it, rewriting it, adding a softer opening, deleting that too. You're not communicating anymore. You're performing innocence for someone who didn't even ask for a trial. Here's what that habit actually communicates, whether you mean it to or not. That your time needs defending. That your choices require a permission slip. That their momentary doubt about you matters more than your own peace. Robert Cialdini's research on influence identified something called the scarcity principle, and part of what makes it work is simple. Information kills mystery. The moment you explain everything, you flood the market. There's nothing left to wonder about, nothing left to value, because there's nothing left unknown. Withheld information, not secrecy, just restraint, is what sustains perceived worth. The people you respect most in your life are rarely the ones who explained themselves the most. They're the ones whose actions didn't need a script running underneath them. This is the divide. The weak over-explain because they need to be understood, need to be forgiven, need the other person to say, "Oh, okay, that makes sense," before they can exhale. The powerful let actions stand on their own. They don't narrate their lives to people who haven't earned the transcript. Now, I want to be precise here, because this is where people twist good advice into something ugly. This is not permission to lie. This is not permission to disappear on people who love you and call it strategy. This is not about ghosting the people who deserve better from you. It's about recognizing the difference between explaining yourself to someone who has earned your honesty and performing justification for someone who wouldn't extend you the same courtesy if the roles were reversed. One is integrity. The other is self-abandonment wearing integrity's clothes. So the next time you catch yourself drafting that fourth version of an explanation nobody demanded, stop. Ask yourself who you're really writing it for. Ask yourself if this is honesty or if this is fear wearing a nicer outfit. Silence, chosen deliberately, says more than most paragraphs ever could. But restraint with your words means nothing if your presence is still an open door, if you're still rearranging your entire life just to remain reachable. And that's the part almost nobody talks about. Restraint with your words is only half the picture. Because you can master your language and still lose yourself completely if your entire life is still built around staying reachable for one person. Picture this. Someone who used to paint on Sunday mornings, used to call their sister every week, used to have a group chat that actually got used. And slowly, one plan at a time, they let it all go, not because anyone asked them to, but because they wanted to be available. Just in case. Just in case the message came through, the invite arrived, the door opened. And here's the cruel part. The more available they became, the less interesting they were to be around. Their world had shrunk down to the size of a phone screen, and people can feel that. Nobody is drawn to a life that revolves entirely around them. It's suffocating. It's a weight, not a gift. This is opinion built on very old wisdom, but it's worth sitting with Marcus Aurelius in Meditations, kept returning to the idea that peace doesn't come from managing how others see you. It comes from directing your own energy inward toward your own conduct, your own standards, your own path. He wasn't writing a dating strategy, he was writing about sanity. But here's the byproduct, whether he intended it or not. People who are genuinely self-directed radiate something. Others sense it. And what they sense, they tend to respect sometimes without even knowing why. This is the real divide. Some people shrink their entire world down until it fits neatly inside someone else's schedule. Others keep building their friendships, their goals, their Sunday mornings, regardless of who's watching. And it's the second group that becomes harder to replace, not because they tried to be unreplaceable, because they simply had more going on than any one relationship could contain. Here's a question worth sitting with, and I want you to actually answer it, not just scroll past it. If the person you're thinking of right now disappeared tomorrow, would your week look any different? Comment full life below if you've already started rebuilding yours from scratch, because that decision, quiet as it is one of the most powerful things you'll ever do for yourself. A full life makes you valuable. That much is true. But value on its own means nothing if you're still the one who drops everything the second your phone lights up. Being interesting isn't enough if you're still on call 24 hours a day. That's the thread we're pulling on now, because a full life means nothing if you still treat every notification like an emergency. Picture this: dinner with friends, real laughter, the kind you don't get enough of. And then the phone buzzes. One name on the screen, and suddenly the fork is down. The conversation is background noise. The thumbs are moving before the brain even decides to let them. Everyone at that table just watched exactly where they rank. And so did the person on the other end of that text, even if they never say it out loud. We already talked about scarcity. Here's where it gets specific. Cialdini's research on influence isn't just about withholding information, it applies directly to access. When something is available at every hour, without limit, without friction, its perceived worth collapses. This isn't cynicism. It's documented consumer psychology, and human attention obeys the same rules as anything else people compete for. Unlimited access reads as low value, whether the thing in question is a product on a shelf or a person at a dinner table. So here's the divide. The weak respond instantly, every time. Because some part of them is terrified that a delay means disappearance, that if they don't answer right now, this person, this chance, this connection will slip away. The powerful respond on their own timeline, not because they're playing a game, but because they've decided their present moment, whatever it is, deserves respect too. And I need to be exact here, because this is where people get this dangerously wrong. This is not about tactics. This is not about waiting a strategic number of minutes to seem desirable. That's manipulation, wearing a costume. And it collapses the second someone catches on to it, because it will get caught. This is about something much simpler and much harder, actual boundaries around your actual time. Being present where you already are, instead of split between the room you're in and the one you wish you were in. The difference between the two is invisible to the other person, but it changes everything about how sustainable this is for you. One is a performance you have to maintain forever. The other is just your life, lived with some self-respect attached to it. Availability is the surface, though. Anyone can learn to leave a message unanswered for an hour. What's underneath that, how much you actually need their approval to feel okay, that's the real test. And it's the one most people fail without ever realizing they're taking it. That test underneath your availability has a name. It's approval, and this is where the real work starts. Picture this. You send something, a message, a photo, a decision you made on your own. And then you wait. Read receipts refreshed. Profile checked, then checked again. A small, quiet part of you standing still, unable to fully exhale, until someone else's reaction tells you whether what you did was okay. That's not connection. That's outsourcing your own peace to someone else's timing. Machiavelli wrote about this dynamic in The Prince, in a chapter about power, not romance, but the principle transfers cleanly. He argued it's more secure to be feared than loved, if you can't have both. Because love is a bond people break the moment it's convenient for them, while respect built on something sturdier tends to hold. Strip away the political context, and you're left with something true in ordinary life too. When your entire sense of okayness depends on being loved and approved of in this exact moment, you are handing someone else the controls to your own stability. That's not affection. That's vulnerability dressed up as devotion. Here's the divide. The anxious many need reassurance before they can act, a thumbs up, a reply, a sign that they're still liked before they'll allow themselves to move forward. The few act first from their own standards and let reactions arrive after, if they arrive at all. They're not colder. They're just no longer asking permission to exist as themselves. And this matters whether you're 24 and rebuilding after a breakup that gutted you, or 65 and reconstructing your sense of self after decades inside a marriage or a career that quietly required you to shrink. Age doesn't exempt you from this pattern, and it doesn't disqualify you from breaking it either. Now, detachment can sound cold when you say it out loud, like something hardened, something closed off. Done wrong, it is. But done right, it's the opposite of toxic. And here's the line that keeps it human. Detach from needing their approval, never from caring about their well-being. You can stop checking read receipts and still show up for someone with your whole heart. You can stop needing validation and still love generously. What you're releasing isn't the connection. It's the leash you've been holding on your own worth, waiting for someone else to tug it and tell you when you're allowed to feel okay. That's the line. Hold it carefully, because the next principle only works if this one is real first. That's the foundation. And it leads directly into the last shift, the one people misunderstand the most and misuse the most. Picture this: a gathering, a room full of noise and conversation, and someone standing in the middle of it, actually there, laughing at something real, not glancing at their phone every 90 seconds, not performing fun while secretly waiting for one particular name to appear on the screen, just present. And here's what happens: without them doing anything else at all, people are drawn toward that ease. They compete quietly for the attention of someone who isn't rationing it out of fear. We already covered why. Kahneman and Tversky's research on loss aversion tells us people reinvest most heavily in what they sense they could actually lose to someone or something else. Not what they're told they could lose. What they can feel is real. That distinction is everything. Which brings me to the part I need to be very direct about. There's a version of this that gets taught constantly in this space, and it's toxic, and I won't pretend otherwise. Manufactured jealousy. Fake plans invented for an audience. Strategic likes on someone else's photos, timed for maximum damage. That's not independence, that's a puppet show, and people can smell a puppet show from a mile away. It's fragile because it's fake, and the moment it's discovered, and it always eventually is, it doesn't just fail. It confirms every insecurity it was pretending to cure. Genuine independence isn't a trick you perform, it's just true. It's the friendships you didn't abandon, the goals you kept chasing, the version of you that existed before this person and will keep existing regardless of what they decide. That's not a threat, and it's not a strategy, it's just a fact of your life, and facts don't need to be announced to be felt. This is the real divide, the one underneath everything we've covered. Some people fake indifference as a manipulation tactic, and it's brittle, transparent, and corrosive to everyone involved, including themselves. Others are genuinely unbothered, because their life outside this one relationship is genuinely full, and that kind of stability doesn't perform. It just is. And it's magnetic precisely because it isn't trying to be. Before we bring this all together, comment feared below if you've caught yourself performing indifference at some point, instead of actually living it. No judgment. Almost everyone has done it at least once. The difference is whether you keep doing it or whether you build the real thing instead. 5 shifts. One thread connects all of them, and most people never see it. Here's the thread, laid bare. Stop over-explaining yourself to people who haven't earned the transcript. Build a life that doesn't orbit anyone full enough that its own gravity holds you. Control your availability, not as a game, but as respect for your own time. Detach from the need for approval and let your own standards move first. And stop performing options you don't have, just live a life full enough that you actually have them. Picture someone standing up from that table now, phone face down, barely glanced at all night, walking out into a life that was already full before they ever sat down, friendships waiting, goals in motion, a version of themselves that doesn't pause when someone else goes quiet. That's the whole divide. One final time. The naive many, still refreshing, still explaining, still available on demand, still waiting for a verdict. And the self-possessed few, who simply stopped asking for permission to be whole. 5 shifts. 1 identity underneath them. None of this works, though, if you use it as a weapon instead of a foundation. So let's be clear about what this actually is, because it would be easy to walk away from this and turn it into something ugly. This is not permission to manipulate. It is not a script for guilt-tripping, punishing, or playing games with someone's emotions. The second any of this becomes a strategy to control another person, it stops working and it starts corroding you from the inside, quietly, the way every dishonest thing does. That was never the goal. This was never about becoming cold or unreachable. It was about becoming someone who no longer needs to perform for love, because they've finally built something real underneath it. And that's true whether you're 23, rebuilding your sense of self after a relationship that hollowed you out, or 71. Learning how to belong to yourself again after decades spent belonging entirely to a marriage, a family, a role that no longer needs you the way it used to. This work doesn't check your age at the door. Picture yourself, months from now, calm in a way you haven't been in years, respected, not because you demanded it, but because you stopped negotiating for it. No longer chasing anyone down a hallway of unanswered messages. Not because you learned how to be feared, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself to be chosen. Comment, I stopped chasing the day you decided you were done doing that to yourself. Remember where we started. The moment they stop fearing your absence is the moment they stop earning your presence. Now you understand why. They will only fear losing you the moment you stop fearing being without them. If this reached something in you, say so in the comments. Tell me which of these 5 hit hardest and where you're starting. But there's one more piece to this. One most people are taught to be ashamed of instead of taught to use. A Stoic principle the powerful understood centuries ago, and the rest of us were never given. That's next. You didn't just hear this, you hold it now. Word count, 118, that completes all 10 sections. The full script totals 3,470 words as outlined. Let me know if you'd like me to assemble everything into one continuous document, or if you want to revise any section first.